Close your eyes and imagine this. One moment, you're soaring through the clouds anticipating Christmas. The next, your world erupts. You're plummeting, alone, for over 2 miles through the churning blackness of an Amazonian storm, still strapped to your seat as the plane around you vanishes into shrieking metal and flame. The last thing you recall is your mother's calm, haunting words. This is the end. But for 17-year-old Julian Kepke, that chilling prophecy was just the beginning of a nightmare that would stretch for 11 agonizing days, a relentless trial of fire and jungle. This is not merely a story of a miracle. It's an epic masterclass in primal survival, where an improbable dance of luck and a deep-seated, almost innate knowledge of the jungle allowed an unbreakable will to defy death at every turn. It was December 24th, 1971. The air inside LANSA Flight 508 buzzed with the festive anticipation of Christmas Eve. Julianne, a shy, observant teenager with her characteristic long, fair hair and thoughtful eyes, sat beside her mother, Maria. Their destination was Pucallpa, Peru, where they were eagerly expected by Julian's father, a renowned zoologist, at his remote research station nestled deep within the Amazon rainforest. It should have been a routine flight, a joyful prelude to family festivities. Instead, the sky above the Amazon that day transformed into a malevolent, living entity, preparing its deadliest surprise. The aircraft, a Lockheed Electra, entered a monstrous cumulonimbus cloud, a superstorm of tropical fury that towered miles high. The plane, once a symbol of human ingenuity, became a helpless toy, violently buffeted by unseen colossal forces. Rain lashed against the windows with the force of thrown stones, and the entire cabin was plunged into an eerie, suffocating darkness, punctuated only by blinding, retina-searing flashes of lightning. A bolt, massive and deafening, struck the right wing, tearing through the metal. Julianne distinctly remembered the wing lighting up with an impossible, otherworldly glow. Then her mother's chilling, almost impossibly calm whisper, "Das ist das Ende, Julian." This is the end. In that precise instant, the plane didn't just break. It disintegrated, torn apart by the sheer, unimaginable violence of the lightning strike and the subsequent explosion. The force of the blast ripped Julianne from her seat, then flung her, still miraculously strapped into a cluster of 3 seats, into the absolute void of the open skiti. She remembered the disorienting sensation of spinning, the incredible, deafening rush of wind, catching a fleeting glimpse of the plane's tail fin spiraling away upwards, and then the dark, forested expanse of the Amazon jungle below, stretching out like an endless, menacing green carpet. She was falling, a human projectile descending over 3 kilometers, more than 10,000 feet, into the heart of the world's most hostile and unforgiving ecosystem. By some incomprehensible miracle, that small cluster of seats, acting like an impromptu autogyro or even a crude makeshift parachute, may have created just enough drag and rotation to slow her descent. She plunged through the impossibly dense, leafy canopy, each branch tearing at her clothes, scraping her skin and cushioning the final, bone-jarring impact as she slammed into the forest floor. The last thing she registered before blacking out was a cacophony of distant, primal animal cries and the incessant, high-pitched buzzing of unseen insects. When Julianne regained consciousness, the jungle was already wide awake around her, bathed in the dappled emerald light of a new day. Sunlight struggled to filter through the impossibly thick, ancient canopy, painting shifting patterns on the humid forest floor. Her head throbbed, a dull, insistent ache that vibrated through her skull. Her entire body screamed in protest, each muscle and bone a testament to the unimaginable forces it had just endured. She had sustained a severe concussion, evidenced by the dizzying fog that clouded her thoughts. Her collarbone was grotesquely broken, a sharp protrusion making even shallow breaths excruciating. Deep, gaping lacerations marred her right arm, and countless smaller cuts and bruises littered her body. Her left eye was swollen shut, and worst of all, her glasses were gone, lost to the abyss. Without them, the vibrant, dangerous world of the Amazon was reduced to a blurry, indistinct nightmare. She could barely discern objects more than a few feet in front of her, making navigation a terrifying gamble. Her first instinct, a primal, guttural cry, was for her mother. "Mama! Mama!" But only the indifferent, overwhelming symphony of the jungle answered. The buzzing of unseen insects, the distant, echoing calls of exotic birds, the rustle of unseen leaves, and the drip of condensation from the canopy above. She was utterly, terrifyingly, profoundly alone. Around her lay scattered debris from the plane crash, twisted metal, shredded luggage, fragments of what was once a human conveyance, a grim, surreal testament to the catastrophe that had just unfolded. She saw more empty seats, torn pieces of luggage, but no other signs of conscious life. The profound silence where her mother should have been, the chilling absence of any response, was the most agonizing, soul-crushing wound of all. Panic, a natural, all-consuming human response, threatened to engulf her completely. But somewhere amidst the searing pain, the paralyzing terror, and the disorienting chaos, a profound, almost instinctual resolve ignited within her. It wasn't just blind luck that had brought her through the fall. It was a miraculous, improbable blend of fortune and the extraordinary gift of her unique upbringing. As the daughter of highly respected zoologists, she hadn't just visited the jungle. She had spent years growing up in this very ecosystem, learning its rhythms, its dangers, and its secrets. Her father's words, drilled into her from childhood, echoed with chilling clarity in her concussed mind, cutting through the fog of pain. If you ever get lost in the jungle, find a stream. Follow it. It will always lead to a larger stream, which will then lead to a river, and a river will eventually lead to civilization. This wasn't a desperate gamble. It was a meticulously taught strategy, imbued with the unimpeachable authority of a lifetime of scientific observation and practical experience. She understood that staying put, waiting for rescue in the vast, almost infinite expanse of the Amazon might mean never being found, slowly succumbing to hunger, thirst, or despair. Movement, deliberate, purposeful movement, was her only viable hope. But how to move effectively with a broken collarbone, a mangled arm, and severely impaired vision that rendered the world a watery smear? Her journey, an epic of personal endurance, began. Each agonizing step was an act of raw, unyielding courage. Without her glasses, the jungle was a bewildering, dangerous blur, a verdant maze of indistinguishable shapes. She relied primarily on her feet, testing the ground before her, shuffling forward, her hands outstretched to feel for unseen roots, fallen logs, and treacherous obstacles. Her hearing, now sharpened by necessity, became her primary guide. The rushing of water, the distant, mournful calls of monkeys, the subtle snap of a twig underfoot. Her most critical and transformative decision came on the second day when she managed to find a small stream. This stream, no wider than a ditch in places, became her constant, life-sustaining companion. She drank from its clear, flowing waters, replenishing her desperately dehydrated body. She knew that stagnant water could harbor deadly parasites and bacteria, but moving water was always a safer bet. Crucially, the stream also offered a path, a narrow, winding corridor through the otherwise impenetrable, suffocatingly dense forest, a liquid thread leading her, however slowly, towards an uncertain future. Her injuries were a relentless, throbbing agony. The broken collarbone made every movement, every shift of weight, every shallow breath excruciating. The deep lacerations on her right arm, constantly exposed to the tropical humidity, quickly festered in the bacterial environment. She knew these wounds were breeding grounds for infection, but she had no means to treat them. She found a small waterlogged bag of sweets on the second day, a tiny, desperate treasure, but it provided only a fleeting burst of energy. She went days without proper food, her body steadily weakening, her muscles wasting away. The Amazon is not a benevolent host. It is alive with countless threats. Piranhas lurked in the deeper, stiller waters, caimans in the sluggish pools along the riverbanks. Poisonous snakes, tarantulas, and scorpions were ubiquitous, though her prior knowledge offered a sliver of reassurance. Most snakes preferred dry land, making the water's edge a relatively safer path. The insects were a constant, maddening torment. Swarms of mosquitoes, relentless biting flies, and the insidious botflies that lay their eggs under the skin, their larvae developing into painful, burrowing pests. She had learned to distinguish between the sounds that signaled potential danger, the rustle of a large predator, the hiss of a snake, and those that were simply the harmless background hum of life in the jungle. By the 5th day, her right arm had become a truly gruesome sight. Maggots, tiny, white, and insidious, had burrowed deep into a large open wound, feasting on the decaying flesh. The thought alone is enough to make one retch, but for Julianne it was a terrifying, sickening reality. She could feel them moving, a distinct, squirming sensation just beneath her skin, a constant, horrifying reminder of her vulnerability. Most people would have succumbed to overwhelming despair, perhaps even lost their minds in such a situation. But again, her father's practical, scientific wisdom, gleaned from years of observation, resurfaced in her beleaguered mind. He had once told her how local villagers would deal with botfly larvae by pouring gasoline into the wound, forcing the larvae to emerge due to lack of oxygen. This was a piece of arcane knowledge that, when she later found a boat and some residual fuel, would prove to be literally life-saving, a bizarre form of self-surgery in the wilderness. Days bled into one another, each one a torturous eternity. The relentless, suffocating humidity, the ever-present fear of the unknown, the gnawing hunger, and the excruciating pain from her multiple injuries began to wear her down not just physically, but emotionally and psychologically. There were countless moments of utter despair, where the thought of simply lying down, surrendering to the jungle's embrace, and giving up became an almost unbearable temptation. She stumbled. She fell repeatedly. She clawed her way back up. Her skin was raw, blistered, and insect-bitten. Her clothes, once a symbol of civilization, were in tatters, barely clinging to her emaciated frame. She barely recognized her own reflection in the occasional still pool of water, a gaunt, terrified ghost, haunted by the memory of the crash and the constant, crushing, soul-destroying silence of her mother's permanent absence. On the 10th day, just as her will seemed to be reaching its absolute breaking point, she heard it. Not the usual, organic symphony of the jungle, but a different kind of sound, a mechanical hum. It was faint at first, a distant, almost imperceptible vibration carried on the humid air. Then, growing louder, more distinct. A motorboat! Her heart, which had been a dull throb for days, surged with a frantic, desperate hope. She dragged herself towards the sound, her last reserves of strength failing, every muscle screaming in agony. She crawled onto a narrow bank, where, through her blurred vision, she saw it. A small hut made of palm fronds and a wooden boat tied nearby. She had no strength left to even call out, to scream for help. She simply collapsed, utterly spent, her consciousness teetering on the brink. She was found shortly thereafter by 3 Peruvian lumberjacks. They were utterly flabbergasted, staring in disbelief at this emaciated, mud-caked, maggot-infested girl who had seemingly materialized from the absolute depths of the impenetrable jungle. They recognized the gruesome wound on her arm. One of the men, with a knowing glance, offered her a small bottle of gasoline. Remembering her father's almost prophetic advice, Julianne, with trembling hands, poured the fuel onto the infested wound. The maggots, starved of oxygen, writhed violently, squirming and slowly crawling out of her flesh. It was a horrifying, stomach-churning sight, but an immediate, visceral wave of relief washed over her, the first true solace she had felt in days. They gave her food, simple but nourishing, and cared for her, before taking her by boat to a mission hospital in a nearby village. Her reunion with her father, who had been part of the fruitless search parties and whose hope had dwindled to almost nothing, was an emotional explosion, a moment of tears and disbelief. He couldn't fathom that his daughter, the sole survivor out of 92 passengers and crew, had not only lived through the fall but had walked out of the jungle. So why Julianne? Why her, out of so many? Her survival was a complex tapestry woven from multiple critical threads. First and foremost, the sheer, unfathomable luck of surviving the initial fall. Being strapped into a seat that potentially acted as a makeshift parachute and landing in a specific manner within the dense, yielding canopy was a 1 in a million chance, a statistical anomaly of the highest order. But luck was merely the opening act. Her most potent secret weapon was an unparalleled scientific knowledge of the Amazon. Her biologist parents had not merely taught her about the jungle, they had immersed her in it, teaching her how to navigate and survive within it. The cardinal rule about following streams, the intuitive understanding of which creatures posed a real threat and which were harmless, and even the obscure, almost bizarre knowledge of treating maggots with gasoline, these weren't random guesses. They were life-saving protocols, deeply ingrained knowledge that became her compass and her medicine. Physically, at 17, she was young, incredibly fit, and likely thin from her prior experiences in the field, which some speculate could have reduced the impact forces compared to a heavier individual. Her body, though severely broken, still possessed the inherent vitality and resilience of youth. But perhaps most crucially, it was Julianne's unbreakable willpower. Despite immense, searing pain, paralyzing fear, soul-crushing loneliness, and the constant, insidious threat of death, she adhered to her father's advice with unwavering discipline. She kept moving, one agonizing, determined step after another, fueled by a primal, unquenchable drive to live and the faint, persistent whisper of hope that refused to be extinguished. Julianne Koepke's journey is more than a tale of survival. It's a profound testament to the intricate, often mysterious dance between pure chance and meticulous preparation. She fell from the sky, plummeted through a raging storm, and faced the Amazon's most brutal, elemental challenges. Yet, armed with invaluable knowledge, an indomitable spirit, and a sliver of astonishing, improbable luck, she emerged, a living, breathing miracle. Her story reminds us that even when all hope seems unequivocally lost, the human spirit, guided by wisdom and sheer grit, can indeed find a path through the deepest, darkest hells.